Now, for more on this, we're being joined by Charles Kupchan, Senior Fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations and former Special Assistant to the President. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA, sir.
Sure, good to be with you.
Now, sir, to begin with, of course, till now we've seen United States fully backing Israel. These talks that have happened, there hasn't been a readout by the Israeli Prime Minister's office yet. This is a sign of some sort of a discord between the two with regards to how the situation is panning out in Gaza. The United States has finally asked Israel to stop causing additional harm to civilians in Gaza, especially children. We also heard President Joe Biden say that they've been quietly working with Israel to have them significantly move out of Gaza. What's your take on this, and how do you see the situation unfolding going forward?
Well, there's no question that behind the scenes, the conversations taking place, U.S. officials, including President Biden, and top Israeli officials have not been easy. And I think there are several areas where there is considerable distance between the views of the U.S. government and the views of the Israeli government. One is the prosecution of the war in Gaza, where the U.S. is urging Israel to take a more surgical approach to limit the loss of civilian life and to get more humanitarian assistance in, more food, more fuel, more medicine. A second issue is the north, where I think some in the Israeli government would like to use military force to push Hezbollah further north into Lebanon, away from Israel's border. I think the United States wants to prevent an escalation in the north. And then the third big issue is what we call the day after. What will Gaza look like once the dust settles? Who will govern Gaza? The U.S. is pushing to bring the Palestinian Authority in to try to keep the area under the purview of Palestinians. I think Israel has talked about getting Gazans to leave and is not interested in bringing the Palestinian Authority in and working toward a future two-state solution. These are big differences between the two parties.
Mr. Kupchan, I also wanted to get your thoughts on this. Now, it's Blinken's fifth visit to Israel since October 7th. It's his fourth West Asian tour. What has changed now, or I would say what has compelled him to now take this kind of a tone with Israel, to asking them that they must stop? Was it not necessary to say this earlier? And children have been dying in Gaza since the first week of the war. Now, of course, we've heard Blinken saying that the death toll of the children is also a big concern. But it was always a concern. What has caused that change in stance now?
Well, you know, the U.S. has been telling Israel from the very beginning, we stand with you, but don't overdo it. When Biden went to Tel Aviv not long after the war began, he said to Netanyahu, don't make the same mistakes that we made after 9/11. Don't act out of anger. And now that we've seen this war go on for multiple months, now that we've seen the death toll in Gaza go over 20,000, including women and children, that message has become more urgent. And I think we haven't yet gotten to a point where the United States is willing to twist arms, to withhold aid, for example, if Israel doesn't begin to change its strategy. But right now, it does appear that Israel is listening and changing. It is withdrawing troops from the north of Gaza. It is talking about getting more humanitarian assistance in. So I think the conversation, the tough talk coming from Washington is making a difference on Israeli strategy.
In fact, sir, I was just going to come to this. What sort of a strategy are we talking about here? What would that even entail?
As far as we can tell, we're seeing a reduction in troop numbers in the north to focus on the south. Some Gazans are actually returning from their evacuation sites in the south to the north. It may be that over time, the fighting in the north dies down because Israel deems that it has largely dismantled Hamas's military capability in that area. It has yet to apprehend the key leadership. As far as we know, there are many Hamas fighters, many Hamas weapons in tunnels underneath southern Gaza. So the fighting will likely continue to a large extent in the south. When do we begin to pivot to a rebuild, reconstruct, talk about the future of Gaza? don't know. But my guess is that the fighting will continue for at least another month before we see the conversation begin to focus on post-war reconstruction and governance.
Another month, and here's hoping that's the end of it, or at the earliest, if not till then. That was Mr. Charles Kupchan joining us on A World DNA from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining in, sir.
Pleasure. Good night.